Hey everyone, welcome back to Make It Happen. My name is Dr. Brent Siebold. I'm your weekly host of this craziness, and I've got one of my dear friends and close colleagues, Cheryl Heller, who is the Director of Design Integrations at the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts at Arizona State University. And I'm with one of her schools. She's also appointed to the W.P. Carey School of Business here at ASU, and also, like me, the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering. And we're all big fans of the J. Orrin Edson Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Arizona State University. And guess what? Make It Happen is all about making something happen with an entrepreneurial mindset. And leveraging your talents as an engineer or as a business leader or as a designer or as a healthcare provider or whatever it is that you do in your lab, in your garage, in your sewing room, I don't know, wherever you hang out, your dance hall. It's about moving that passion into the open marketplace to make people's lives better. And so Cheryl is not only a great academic and a great leader in our university ecosystem, but she's also an accomplished author. She has her own book, something about design in the galaxy. I don't recall the exact title. I bought it on Amazon, but it hasn't come yet. It's taken forever to get delivered to my house. Maybe it's out of stock, Cheryl. I don't know. But
I'll
Cheryl
give you.
Heller, ladies and gentlemen, here she is with us today. Cheryl, please tell us, how are we going to make it happen, leveraging all of your expertise?
Okay, all my expertise in 20 minutes. You ready?
Yes.
First of all, thanks for this opportunity, Brent. I'm always happy to partner with you on anything. And I love the series and I love the idea of making it happen. I have spent my life thinking about how to make things happen, how to launch things, how to build things, how to help other people build things. And so I love this whole idea. But I started out as a painter. I thought I was actually going to be an artist. And then I became a designer, and I was sort of classic designer that made things. And little by little, it became apparent to me that it was really important to understand language in a really different way if I was going to be able to do what I wanted. And what I want is pretty much to do what I want. I want people to say yes. And I want to be able to follow my own interests and make things up as I go along. And so in the spirit of sharing something that's been an important lesson in my life, I want to talk about language. And if you know me, those of you who are in the MSIVD program, you know that this is a passion of mine. And this is Jesse Kornbluth is he's a journalist and an author and a screenwriter. And he came to lecture one of my classes in New York. And he said, writing is how you get what you want. And when you think about it, we don't get anything that we want unless we can express it in words. And unless we can express it in words that other people pay attention to. I used to think that writing was separate from doing stuff or from acting on things. I saw words as something that came before or after you made things happen, reports that you had to write up, briefs that somebody else wrote. And I didn't really recognize that words are actually the way that we do make things happen. They're the way we understand. They're the way we create reality. So for the next 15 minutes or so, I want to change the way that you all think about the language that you use. And I want to start with an assignment. And one of the things, I think one of the reasons I came to this point of view and I started getting so involved in language was out of self-defense, which is how I do a lot of things, right? But people would write briefs for things I had to do, or they would summarize something and I would say, yeah, you know what? I don't really agree with that. That's not what I would have said. And so I just took on the challenge of figuring out what it is I would have said instead. So for now, I would like in the next 10 seconds for everybody just to write down what you do and why it matters. And don't stop with I'm a student or I'm an entrepreneur or I'm a teacher or I'm an engineer. That's not really who you are, and it's not why you matter. So push a little deeper and just put down 20 words about what you think that is. And in the end, I'll share what I came to about what I do. You writing, Brent?
Yeah, luckily I have mine ready. I'm just copying and pasting it from.
Good. Good.
No, this is a. I'll write it on the notebook paper here. I've got mine handy.
It's actually one of the hardest things there is to do, because it forces you to try to capture everything you're about, right? All your complexity, all your dreams, and think about why it matters. All right, we'll keep going and we'll come back to that. And I'm counting on everybody participating in this at the end. So as evidence of the importance of language, there's a hypothesis called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is basically that the language we use is not only reflects reality that we're trying to describe, but it is reality. And this has to do with why the way we describe what we want to do, the way we describe what we want to see, is actually a predictor of the future. For example, David Bohm, the physicist, was trying to figure out why people in the West and Europeans have such a hard time really understanding quantum physics. Like we understand the theory, we know that Newtonian physics are not really the way the world works, but we can't really understand it. And they looked at language as one of the reasons why it's so difficult for us. And there's a really interesting piece of research that Bohm was involved in. So if you look at a sentence like the cat chases the mouse, it's how we talk. And it's typical of our language, which is fixed objects and verbs, and they're separate from each other. So like classical physics, this deals with objects located in a place in space and time. And they looked at Native American languages. I won't try to pronounce that. But they began to suspect that the way that we frame ideas in language has to do with our ability to understand certain concepts. So in Native American speakers, their language doesn't divide the world in categories like fish or trees or birds. This sentence actually it contains movement. So in this language, a song is alive and singing is happening and everything is moving and fluid. And so it's much easier for them to grasp other concepts. And evidence that the way that we frame the world is archaic and is keeping us from understanding certain important things. There's a wonderful writer named Meg Wheatley who said that all change begins with language, that no matter what you want to do, it starts with a conversation between people. And it's the only way that things happen, right? You say something to somebody and they either ignore you because they've got their face in their phone, or you say something that gets their attention, and maybe you say something that's interesting enough for them to respond to and to help you think about. There's another really wonderful book by a guy named William Manchester. He's a wonderful historic writer. He wrote a book called A World Lit Only by Fire. And he talked about the fact that in the Dark Ages, people didn't have names, and soldiers couldn't find their way home after battles because their villages had no names. And so they'd say, I'm trying to get back to that place with a stream and a tree by the stream. And so they would end up living somewhere else. But it was a time without labels. And we've come really far since then, right? Because we've gone way beyond having names and having names for our towns and our neighborhoods and our types of houses. We have labels for everything. And we tend to label things, and we tend to use them to think about our own identity versus other. And no matter where it is or where you go, right? Our man-made world has been created through language, and it's been created through this kind of separation and particularization and specialization. We believed for a long time that our species was the only one that used language. Now we know that even bacteria talk to each other, not to mention crows and elephants. There's a scientist who's retired now. Her name is Payne. And she was the person who, she spent the first half of her life with a microphone dangling in the ocean. She was the one who discovered that whales have different songs and they change them with the seasons. And she was sitting outside of an elephant pen in a zoo, I think in Washington State or somewhere. And she felt something, and she thought that it reminded her, she played the organ, and it reminded her when she hit really low notes that she couldn't hear, but she would sort of feel the vibration. So she went back with a sound engineer to sit outside the elephants and record them. And they came back and played it at a faster speed. And she discovered that elephants have a really sophisticated language, not words in the way that we know, but that they have a pattern and a way to communicate with each other. So there's now a project in Africa, I forget which country, where they are coming to understand elephant language and translate it. So it is obviously not something that humans have, are the only ones who do. We are, however, pretty much the only species that uses language so abstractly that we don't have access to reality anymore, right? Because we so confuse things. There's another wonderful book called The Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram, where he talks about the fact that when our language, our text became abstract instead of pictorial, which most indigenous languages are, that we lost touch with nature at that point. So this is what we've done to language. This is what all of us in academia, in engineering, in education, in healthcare, any profession you look at, right? We have so abstracted language and names, and so removed them from humanity and from our relationships with the natural world that it's almost impossible to get any meaning from them anymore. We write things like this when we're trying to communicate about food labels. Although a food label may say free range chicken, don't assume your bird was scampering outside. If a product says 0 trans fat, it actually isn't at 0. All the things that we know, right? So what we want to think about is, how do we actually use language to represent what we want the reality to be? Another example is the Oxford Junior Dictionary. Added chat room and committee and MP3 player to the list of words that young people should know. But unfortunately, they dropped acorn and bluebell and newt and willow. So imagine what they're saying, that it's okay for children not to know what an acorn is or what a newt or a willow is. There's been research to prove that our diet of reading blogs and really brief summations of things in sound bites actually makes us stupider. Reading headline news or entertainment news, any of those things that rely on lists or punchy headlines, they actually dumb us down. And conversely, there's also proof that reading novels, reading complex language, deepens us. It makes us think about things, and it teaches us empathy. In other words, it makes us more human. And just one piece of language that I love, this is an amazing essay writer named Charles D'Ambrosio. He said, in a leveling climate of summations, crowded with public figures who speak exclusively from positions of final authority, issuing an endless stream of conclusions, I get a wary sense in my gut of a world that's making its appeal to my indolence and emptiness, asking only for surrender. So this is a writer who is reflecting on language, reflecting on life and his reality. Everybody knows who these two characters are, right? Does everyone know that they were born on precisely the same day in 1809? The reason I have them here is because they're two examples of people who really did change the world. No kidding around, no using that expression lightly. And they each did it through language. Lincoln used lawyerly logic that he just never, he was relentless at making a case. Darwin used narrative, he used his powers of observation, and they had completely different approaches to how to use language. But it's remarkable how focused they were on language and communication in accomplishing what they did. And if you want to read about them, Adam Gopnik has written a wonderful book called Angels and Ages. One of the things that's interesting is to think about how actually communication works and the functions that it has. So when you want to express an idea, the first phase is to really capture that idea in a way that people understand it, which is definition. And unless you take the time to do that in a way that expresses your uniqueness, nobody ever pays attention, right? And this is especially important when you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and launching something. There's another role that language plays, which is in creating understanding. How does your idea work? How long does it take? What's it going to cost? Who needs to be involved? That's a very logical use of language. And then the third way that language functions is to engage other people in and to invite them in. And that's when narrative comes in. And what's useful about this when you are launching something is to know that you can't skip the first two. You can't just get out there and start talking to people before you've really articulated your idea in a way that people are going to care and understand how unique it is. Two fast examples. Those of you who are in the MSIVD program have looked at this, but this was a postdoc fellow for the Kauffman Foundation who had a new invention that he was really excited about, and he sent this to me, and my job was to help him present it to potential funders in a way that they would be compelled to give him money. And he kept saying, well, this really says everything about what I'm doing. And I kept saying, you know what, I don't get it. And we had a really tense couple of days together because he kept giving me more detail and more information about how it worked and why it was important, and I never got it. The end of our session together, he finally said out of frustration, we teach computers to program. And what that is and what it's an example of is the fact that oftentimes when you communicate with people, you need to give them a frame so that they understand the category of what you're talking about. And oftentimes this seems really self-evident. We want to jump into all of the detail of why we think it's so important, but it doesn't work. Another example is Seventh Generation, who had so many ideas about what they were trying to do and why they mattered. They had a mission, they had inspiration from their name, which was part of an Iroquois law. They had global imperatives that nobody could ever reach, and ended up through a long process coming to a really simple statement about what they did and why they mattered, that they wanted to be the first company to make being green the new normal. So another kind of idea about the importance of not necessarily using fancy words, but using words that are compelling for you and compelling for the people that you want to support them. So you can think about this as expressing what you want in a way that inspires you and maybe scares you a little and is audacious, but becomes your North Star for what you're going to make happen. So a couple of just principles. You want to always think about describing what you want, not what you don't want, right? Don't talk about what you don't want to make happen because words become the reality. You want to be concrete and specific. And this is the hardest thing of all, because we speak in generalities, we speak in sound bites, we speak in cliches that we've heard before. So it's really, really difficult to be specific enough. And what we talk about is expressing an idea in a way that's concrete enough so that you'll recognize it when you get there. And then finally, you want to find language that isn't the same as what everybody else is describing when you're trying to say that you're different. And we talk about using unworn language. And then a wonderful writer named William Irwin Thompson, who summed it up by saying that, like fly fishers, we cast images in front of ourselves and then slowly reel ourselves into them, turning them into reality. And I would love now to ask you to look at what you wrote about yourself and think about how it holds up and whether it captured what it is that you want to be represented for and what you want to make happen. And one more quote from David Ogilvy, which is that when Aeschines spoke, they said how well he speaks. But when Demosthenes spoke, they said, let us march against Philip. So style is not what we're looking for. We're looking for motivation. And I will stop sharing so we can have a conversation. Did I make it in the 15 minutes, Brent? Sorry.
You nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I probably speak for most of the group when I would say keep going. But you're right. Let's definitely have a discussion, and let's motivate this group to go to war for good. Not
all right.
for
Well, there's
that.
stuff in chat.
Yeah. Hey, I thank you so much, Cheryl. I really appreciate your time, your energy, your commitment to helping our students and our affiliates here at Arizona State University make something happen and leverage the power of language to do so. It's so important and something we don't think about enough, I don't think. So really appreciate that. This is where, Cheryl, you say, thanks, Brent. Really, it was great.
Are you saying goodbye to me? I'm sorry, I'm looking at chat because I want to talk to people about what they wrote.
Yeah.
You know what? Thanks, Brent. I really, as I said, I take every opportunity to partner with you because it's always worthwhile. And this already looks like a hugely interesting group. And I don't know if anybody wants to be picked on or whether anybody wants to start a discussion by talking about anything that struck them or anything they're doing.
Yeah, let's jump into a discussion. Thanks, Cheryl. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.